Om Shivaya, everyone. Welcome back to our webinar on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. This is our fifth webinar. And today our format's a little different. We're going to lighten up a bit. We're going to start with 11 verses from chapter 4, the last chapter, going through them fairly quickly, and then we'll leave the remaining some 25 verses for the next two webinars. Part 2 will be bringing in Gurudeva and Yoga Swami and comparing their teachings to certain key ideas in the Yoga Sutras. So here we go. The verses are from chapter 4, called Kaivalya Pada. Kaivalya is the term Patanjali uses for moksha. Verse 1. The powers are the result of birth, herbs, mantras, austerity, or samadhi. Comment. There are 5 different possible causes for attaining paranormal powers, the powers we presented last time. In this verse, birth means that the powers come at the time of birth because of practice in previous lives. Verse 2. The transformation of the outer nature comes about by the flooding forth of the inner nature. The Sanskrit word rendered as outer nature is jati, which in its broadest sense means species, class by birth, category. Comment. The term jati is a broad one, referring both to class by birth and species. In either case, the verse is indicating that a major change in the outer nature comes from a change in the inner nature. The next verse completes the idea. In other words, we can imagine a person where things are going very poorly and therefore they're kind of down and depressed. And you see that in their expression and their outer nature. So what changed it is what happened inside. Their inner transformation was a negative transformation, and it changed their outer appearance. Likewise, someone can go through a number of successes in life, and those successes make the person more positive, change the inner in a positive way, and again, that would change the outer nature. You can see that in the face and in the behavior. And in a purely religious sense, we go on pilgrimage and we have certain inner experiences, and those could really change the outer nature in a major way. And you'd come back and people would realize something happened on the inside. You're different than before the pilgrimage. Verse 3. Incidental external events are not the cause of such a transformation, but merely remove obstacles as does a farmer. Transformation into this form or that is not driven by the causes proximate to it, just oriented by them. The way a farmer breaks down a barrier to let the water flow in for irrigation. That's the image that the commentators like to use. Verse 4. This is where it gets a bit abstract, and we're not going to try and explain things too deeply. The manifestation of a mind's individualized sense is solely caused by the presence of I amness. Again, the vagueness of the verse has given rise to some complicated theories of yogis creating a mind. Simplest idea is that what is created is the sense of being a separate individual. So that's caused by this quality, asmita in Sanskrit, where I amness is present and makes us think of ourselves as a separate individual person. Verse 5. Although the many individual minds are engaged in distinct activities, there is but one mind that is the originator of them all. Sounds like one of Gurudeva's verses, right? There is but one mind, functions in various phases. So it's a similar idea. The simplest interpretation is that all minds are created from the same blueprint, so to speak, which is the principle of I amness. Verse 6. Of these many minds, a mind born out of meditation is without stored karma. Again, the vagueness of the verse has given rise to the interpretation that a yogi is creating another mind through his meditation. The simpler idea is that the practice of meditation changes the mind so that it eventually eliminates stored karma. In other words, normally we work through our karma through physical actions, and it's a slow process. If someone's in a monastery, they can work through it faster, but still it's a slow process. We can speed the process up through meditation, which can eliminate karmas when we learn how to do that. Gurudeva talks about that in Merging with Shiva. That speeds up the process. Instead of going through the actual physical experience, through the practice of meditation, we can eliminate the karma that would happen in this or future life just through meditation. Verse 7. A yogi's karma is neither white nor black. Others' karma is threefold. Comment. Karma is white, meaning positive, of course, black, meaning negative, or a mixture of both, which is the third kind. A non-yogi has all three categories of karma. However, when an advanced yogi acts, the karma is created and simultaneously dissolved. So that's how we get out of this bind of every action continues to create a reaction in the future. If that's the case, how can we ever achieve moksha? We're waiting for the reaction to our last action to come back. Well, this is how, when we get up to a certain stage of unfoldment, the action and the reaction happen simultaneously. Gurudeva has a image in Merging with Shiva where he says it's like riding on water. An advanced yogi acts like riding on water, it's instantly gone, or the reaction has been handled simultaneously with the action. Verse 8. Thence follows the manifestation of those vasanas only which correspond to the fruition of their particular karma. Comment. Actions produce two types of latent impressions. The latent impression of the action itself is called a karmic deposit, karmasya. The latent impression of the feeling occurring at the time of the action is called vasana. When a karma fructifies, the vasana corresponding to it also manifests. So we'll feel the same way. We'll have the same emotional reaction we did when the original action occurred, as when the karma comes back to us as the fruit of the action, we'll have the same emotional reaction. Verse 9. On account of the similarity between memory and corresponding samskaras, there is continuity, even though cause and effect may be separated in terms of birth, place, and time. In other words, we carry forward who we are. We don't start over with a blank slate. We carry it forward kind of in summary form, but it's in there. Comment, the nature of a person in one life carries over into a subsequent one through some scars being brought forward. This occurs even though the person may be born in very different circumstances. Verse 10, and these samskaras are without beginning because of the eternal nature of the desire to live. Comment, the process of samskaras carrying forward from one life to the next has always been in existence. And the last verse for this webinar. Since vasanas are connected to the cause, fruit, substratum, and support, when these factors disappear, the vasanas also disappear. Comment, under the influence of the kleshas, cause, an individual acts with a purpose, fruit, toward the object, support, presented to consciousness, substratum. This process creates samskaras that combine to form vasanas. Subsequent insights into how a specific vasana was formed can remove that vasana. So negative vasanas are something that Gurudeva talks about removing. Vasana Daha Tantra, sound familiar? That's for the purpose of eliminating negative vasanas, and is done so, as we know, by writing them down and burning them. So that's one way of eliminating negative vasanas. So all of that's pretty deep, and I don't expect any questions, but we'll give you an opportunity to ask questions on these 11 verses. The rest of the material gets a lot lighter. So any questions?
While we're pausing for a moment here, I'll just mention to our late arrivals to please check your green bar and open your participants panel and chat panel if you haven't already. And you'll be able to see who is attending. And the chat window is where you would type the words, I have a question, if you wish to ask Satguru something. And then we will activate your audio and video to do so. Thank you.
Well, we'll just wait a minute here. As I said, I don't expect any questions. It's pretty deep. Yay, we don't see questions. A story. Thank goodness, something light. Story from Guru Chronicles. While awaiting the refreshments, Yogaswami asked his guest if he had read Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms. Guest, of course, is Gurudeva. In fact, he got the book down from his shelf, commenting it was the only book he kept. So Yogaswami only kept one book, Yoga Sutras. Gurudeva said yes, he had read it. In fact, it was the only book he had really studied during his early training. He had read and practiced it for years. But we can see it's the only book that both Yogaswami and Gurudeva really felt was essential to keep and study and practice. So that's why we're looking at it. Yogaswami tossed a few penetrating questions about the Pitta Yoga Classic. Gurudeva answered quickly and clearly. Recounting this experience later, he said the answers came immediately, not as an intellectual memory, but from within. So we're going to go through some of the verses and bring in Gurudeva's and Yogaswami's teachings. So the verses will be repetitive. Chapter 1, verse 2. Oh, this is really the most important verse to memorize, because it's defining yoga. It's good to memorize the Sanskrit too. It's not that hard. Just 4 words. Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the restraint of mental activities. So look at the words. Chitta means mind. Vritti, activities. So you put the two together and chitta vritti becomes mental activities. And nirodha is to restrain them. So yoga is the restraint of mental activities. Have a quote from Yoga Swami, it's relevant. Waves rise in the ocean, so waves of thought arise in the mind. Yoga is to control thoughts as they arise. Great ones say that yoga means union. If you want to take hold of something, all the fingers must join together. Similarly, in order to reach God, the mind must become one-pointed. It is not a simple thing to control the mind. It cannot be done in a day or even a year. Through constant effort, thoughts can be controlled a little. In this way, the uncontrollable mind can finally be brought under control. This is the supreme victory. So we have the image of waves on the ocean. Waves rise in the ocean. So it's a nice way of looking at mental activities. And you see that on Kauai. Generally, the ocean is medium activity, which is probably our normal for most of us. Our thoughts are medium, but when there's a storm out there, it really has a serious increase in activity. And then some days it's totally placid. There's no movement at all. So it's a nice comparison to the mind in that regard. So meaning of nirodha, restraint, we'll look at that. So in these slides, I've just pulled out a few ideas. What I'm going to read is a bit long, and you don't have all of it on the slide. It's just, you have some key ideas on the slide to help you focus on the topic. This is from a talk I gave, commenting on this second verse. Chitta vritti just means mental activity. Nirodha is the word that's translated as restraint, and that's what I wanted to look at. Yoga is the restraint of mental activities. What kind of restraint is it? That's the question. My first image was, get an aggressive dog on a leash and you're holding back, right? That's a kind of restraint. If you're sitting in meditation and you feel that way, you should know that it is clearly not ideal. There's too much effort being put into the process. One of the translations we have, which is very good, uses the word to still. Yoga is to still the patterning of consciousness. That's a better image, to just be slowly quieting something down. Take, for example, a baby that's crying. Helping the baby cry less and less until it is not crying at all. This would mean steadily lessening the amount of thinking that is taking place until finally there is no thinking at all. But there's clearly more to it than that. Yoga Swami has a quote on this, which initially sounds contradictory. Now we don't control the mind. That's what we've been talking about, right? Controlling the mind. So he's saying the opposite. Now we don't control the mind. We remain summa with a controlled mind. Summa is a Tamil word meaning quiet. Yoga Swami used it frequently in the phrase summa iru, which means to be still. Yoga Swami's approach is taking away altogether the sense of an active effort to control something. It's saying, okay, we can start with either one of these, the dog on the leash, if it's that bad, the mind is that agitated, we can start like quieting a baby, but we're supposed to end up in a state where there's no effort to control the mind. To get there, we've used effort. But the ideal is to get to a place where we just sit in a state of consciousness where the mind's activity is still. We remain summa with a controlled mind. Gurudeva elaborated on this idea in the second of the 52 Mambashum. Here again, like last week, we have a basic Mambashum that is well worth intense study. Especially begin the year by working on Kalibasa and Nikashum. Remember that through the control of the natural flow of the breath, awareness is released from the area of the mind that we call the thinking mind. Here we're getting a clue on how to do it. Yogaswami indicated what we want to do. We want to end up summa with a controlled mind, but how do we do that? So far we have talked about it through analogy, but not through practice. Gurudeva is saying control of the natural flow of breath causes awareness to be released from the area of the mind that we call the thinking mind. So we do it through control of the natural flow of breath. Gurudeva continues, through perfect posture, kasa or nifmasi, the karayana currents of the body are quieted and transmuted. Nihim flows then into vumchayudi. That is why as soon as one sits for meditation, the thought forces are activated more than usual. Karayana is the Shum word for ida, or the more physical current. Vumchayudi is the Shum word for pingala, which is the more mental current. So the point made, the thought forces are activated more, is probably something you've never thought about. In other words, we're doing fine, then we sit to start to meditate and our mind becomes more active. That's because we transmuted force out of the physical into the mental. So we pull force out that was in the physical current into the mental current, and therefore the mental current is now more active. What do we do? Gurudeva says, however, when the control of the breath occurs with measured exhalations and inhalations, the vumchayudi current, that's the pingala, is transmuted, and all that is left is good old Simshung BC, power of the spine. Then and only then are we really ready to meditate. When I meditate, it is a very unusual occasion when Nihim enters the thought area of the mind at all. So that's definitely the goal. Very unusual to enter the thought area of the mind during meditation. And how do we achieve that? Through controlling the breath. You've heard me explain that a number of times. The way I do is say the breath and thinking are interrelated. And you can go at it from one side or the other. If our thinking becomes agitated, our breath becomes shallow. If our breath becomes shallow, our thinking becomes agitated. If our thinking slows down, our breath slows down. And if we focus on the breath, slow it down and regulate it, then our thinking becomes slower. So that's the goal, to end up in that area of mind that both Yogaswami and Gurudeva are describing. It's an area of the mind because the ida and pingala, vumchayudi, karayana are balanced. We're in the spiritual center and our consciousness has come up. We've transmuted energy. We're in a state that tends not to think. That's the idea. By controlling the mind, we want to end up in a state where we don't have to control it. It's just quiet. Yogaswami's statement makes more sense now. Now we don't control the mind, we remain summa with a controlled mind. That's the result of first controlling the mind. Specifically, we first control the mind through sitting up straight. This transmutes karayana. We breathe in a regulated way in and out. This transmutes vumchayudi. hold the mind steady, and by that control, we don't have to control. We've ended up summa, with a controlled mind. We have achieved this by moving above the area of mental activity or having a higher vibration than mental activity. Therefore, there is no mental activity. It's just gone because our consciousness is more dynamic than the area of the mind that thinks. And it's also balanced. Ida and Pingala are balanced. So, this is an easier topic. See a question.
Tina, your audio should be there, and maybe you can turn on your video too.
Or Shivaya.
Okay, well, we'll just answer. Question is, at what level of meditation does one have to be before one can see changes in mind or karma? Does it have to be in realms of contemplation or even simple japa? Well, I think the two are quite distinct, changes in mind or karma, and we don't necessarily see them ourselves, but they're happening. The first change in mind, I think, is we would tend to be more in the middle. Daily life, we would tend not to get out into extremes of over elation, over depression. We'd be more balanced person because of meditation. It's a simple change that could take place early on. I think second change, just to mention two, not along the subject, is intuition. Meditation can lead to being in touch with our intuition and learning how to solve problems with intuition, learning when we have an intuition, how to identify it. And that would depend on the person's previous practices and generally how heavy the subconscious is, how long that would take. In terms of karma, what Gurudeva says is regular religious practices regulate the karma. So that happens just through regularity, be it worship in the home, worship at the temple, meditation, all of those count toward regularity. We do them every week. And our karma comes at us in a more regulated way, meaning it's kind of spaced out better. We don't get overwhelmed by it, too many negative things happening at once. They will happen, but they're in a better time. We have more space between them. To actually eliminate karma is a deep process. And that is an advanced practice through meditation. It's easier to eliminate karma on pilgrimage by the power of ancient temples. Just being open to the blessings of the deity, that can eliminate karma. It's easier for it to happen that way than through meditation. Well, any questions on our last topic of restraint? Dealing with a controlled mind rather than controlling it. Okay, we'll move on then. Well, we're repeating the same verse. As I mentioned, we're just drawing on these verses to support some of Gurudeva and Yoga Swami's teachings. Okay, we have another question. Shrikant has a question.
Yes. Yeah. One moment, I'll activate him. Okay, Shrikant, you should see a video camera icon now next to your name.
Okay, does this work?
Om Shivaya.
Namah Shivaya. A quick question, Swami, which is...
Please speak up.
Then the video will go away, which is fine. My question is, so to begin with, our practice is to sit up straight and breathe regularly. The question I had is if we are going to use breathing as a crutch, will we get so dependent on counting our breath and that we'll never progress beyond it? Because I always have a problem. I'm always counting my breath and breathing regularly, and the moment I stop, it all goes away again.
Well, the idea on breathing is when we've practiced it enough, then when we take our mind off of the regulated breathing, it stays regulated. It doesn't return to its previous state. So that's what in our monastery meditation, that's the way it's written up. You're counting your breath, you're very aware of it for the first few levels of the Shu meditation, and then you just let it. You don't think about it, and it stays regulated. So that's the goal, and that happens through practice. So definitely you don't want to be focused on your breathing throughout. That come close to answering it?
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay, so we're in this next part here. Again, the same verse. Yoga is the restraint of mental activities. Then awareness abides in itself. At other times, awareness takes on the form of the activities. The identity of awareness, the experiencer, with what is experienced, is the cause of what is to be overcome. The identity of the seer with the seen is the reason that the essential form of the power of the owner is perceived to be that of the owned. This identity is caused by ignorance. Ignorance is avidya. With the disappearance of that ignorance, the identity also disappears. This is total cessation, the aloneness, kaivalya, of the power of awareness. For him who sees the distinction between seer and seen, there comes about the discontinuation of the projection of the false self-sense. And now we get some commentaries on that. Oh, our topic is yoga as separation. In general usage, the Sanskrit word yoga means union. The union referred to is that of the individual self with the Supreme, also described as Atman with Brahman and Jiva with Shiva. The Pangala Upanishad states, as water poured into water, milk poured into milk, ghee into ghee become one without differentiation, even so the individual soul and the Supreme Self become one. However, the process to which the term yoga refers in the Yoga Sutras is one of separating rather than joining. Merriam-Webster's definition of yoga captures this subtlety, which is a surprise that such a major dictionary would be so precise. Yoga, a Hindu theistic philosophy, which means it's talking about Patanjali's yoga, teaching the suppression of all activity of body, mind, and will. That's what we're talking about, nirodha, restraint, in order that the self may realize its distinction from them and attain liberation. So that's what our verse, a couple of verses ago said, the seer stops identifying with the seen and therefore achieves kaivalya or aloneness. So distinction from them is Merriam-Webster. Here we have Georg Feuerstein. the late Indologist, who was considered an expert on the Yoga Sutras, he stated this idea as follows. According to one definition, especially popular among Vedanta and Neo-Vedanta followers, yoga means union. Although this may be correct as regards certain forms of yoga, it is definitely inapplicable to Patanjali's Kriya Yoga, whose essence consists rather in a disunion, namely the disjunction of the Purusha and the world. So again, we're talking about yoga as separation. When we get to Gurudeva, here's Gurudeva's perspective on this concept. Consciousness and awareness are the same when awareness is totally identified with and attached to that which it is aware of. To separate the two is the artful practice of yoga. Isn't that amazing? Using the same words. Naturally, the Shung-Chafe language is needed to accomplish this. When awareness is detached from that which it is aware of, it flows freely in consciousness. A tree has consciousness. Awareness can flow into the tree and become aware of the consciousness of the tree. Let me share an interesting anecdote. Gurudeva, in the early years of teaching, was working with someone in Nigeria. When you work with someone closely, your awareness can end up in their country. Gurudeva mentioned that he saw himself in Africa flowing through these huge leaves in the jungle. So his awareness was aware of the consciousness in the leaves in Africa. Continuing the quote. A tree has consciousness. Awareness can flow into the tree and become aware of the consciousness of the tree. Consciousness and mind are totally equated as a one thing when awareness and consciousness are a one thing to the individual. But when awareness is detached from that which it is aware of, it can flow freely through all five states of mind and all areas of consciousness, such as plants and the earth itself, elements and various other aspects of matter. Here we find awareness separate from consciousness, and consciousness separate from the five states of mind attributed to the human being. Consciousness, mind, matter, and awareness experience a oneness in being for those who think that they are their physical body, who are convinced that when the body ends, they end and are no more. Any questions on the difference between awareness and consciousness, and separating awareness from consciousness? Kaif. Kaif's coming up in a second. Why don't we hold the question on Kaif and let you ask it? Then Kaif is the next subject after we finish this one. This is more on awareness and consciousness are normally joined, and when we separate them, we have something different. And consciousness is not just human consciousness. Plants, animals have consciousness too that we can be aware of. Let me share the example I generally use to illustrate this point. I hold up a piece of paper and say, imagine a piece of paper, I see the paper. That makes sense, right? I see the paper. If I say, I am the paper, how many of you think that? No one, right? We're trained that we're not physical objects. We perceive them. We see the paper. We smell the incense. I hear the water moving. That's the way we think. But then we say, I am happy. We're the happiness, but we're not the paper. The idea is to distinguish what is mental in the same way we distinguish what is physical. We don't want to say, I am happy. We want to say, I, as awareness, perceive there's an emotion called happiness in there. That I am the perceiver of happiness. My emotions are currently in a state of being happy. But I am perceiving that. That isn't who I am. It's just like I am not the paper. So one of the phrases we don't want to use is my awareness, because you are awareness. You don't want to say my awareness, because that makes you separate from your awareness. It's like your ring, your watch. My awareness. I as awareness. So that's who you are. The I is the awareness. We have to change our perspective on what's going on inside of us so that we are so as detached from it as we are from what's outside of us. We have to retrain ourselves because we've been trained to have a perspective that I am what's going on inside, but I am not what's going on outside. But you're not either. That's what Gurudev is pointing out. Consciousness, mind, matter, and awareness experience a oneness in being for those who think that they are their physical body, who are convinced that when the body ends, they end and are no more. Then we have a second quote from Gurudeva. The average person who is not a mystic lives 2/3 in the external area of the mind and 1/3 within himself. The within of himself can be and sometimes is very foreboding. He doesn't understand it. He's a little afraid of it and prefers to involve himself with external things. Possibly he's had some inner experiences, some emotional unhappinesses, and he shuns anything that is inner. The mystic lives and is taught to live 2/3 within himself and only 1/3 in the external. In learning how to do this, the mystic is taught to become consciously conscious or aware that he is aware. He learns to separate awareness from that which he is aware of. The person who is not a mystic living 2/3 in the external mind says, I am happy, meaning I am aware of a state of mind called happiness. I am in that state, or that is me. Or I am unhappy. Unhappiness is me. The mystic living 2/3 within says to himself, I am flowing through the area of the mind that's always unhappy. He doesn't change. He's a pure state of awareness. One of the advantages of the perspective of I am flowing through the area of the mind that's always unhappy is then it's easier to conceive of moving into another area of the mind. You just happen to be in the area of consciousness called unhappiness, but you know you aren't unhappiness. I, as awareness, am in this area of emotion called unhappiness. Do I want to stay there? Do I want to complain all day and make other people unhappy too? A great tendency of mankind is as we upset other people because they are happy and we are unhappy. And that's not fair, right? If I'm unhappy and they're happy, I have to make them unhappy too. However, instead of making them unhappy, you can make yourself happy. That's the idea here. If we are detached enough from unhappiness, meaning we look at it just as we look at the paper, we are able to see where awareness has ended up because of what's happened. Usually it's a reaction, like bouncing off something, we end up somewhere. If we look at it like that, then we can consider the possibility of pulling ourselves out of that and experiencing another area of consciousness in a short period of time, which is the goal. It's not that we're never unhappy, but someone who holds this perspective doesn't stay there as long. So skip the question and just look at the practice. So this is our graphic for practice. This one you might want to write down. It is helpful when you find yourself in a negative state of consciousness, such as discouragement. Describe it in this way. I, as awareness, am in the negative state of consciousness of discouragement, want to move out of it as quickly as possible. This replaces saying, I am discouraged. So that's what we don't want to say. I am discouraged. I am unhappy. I, as awareness, ended up somehow in an area of the mind called discouragement. I, as awareness, events of the day, somehow I ended up in an area of the mind called unhappiness. I certainly don't want to stay there. I want to move out of it as quickly as possible. Move to a more pleasant, a more positive area of the mind. So this is a practice that is based upon Not saying, I am unhappy, I am discouraged, I am this, I am that. Just rewording it till it becomes a way that we really look at it. We kind of laugh when we end up in a negative state of mind instead of just taking it for how we have to be the rest of the day. What in the world happened to put me into this state of mind today? Now we're going to look at Kaif, and then we'll come to Ajahn question. So we're looking at the Shun term Kaif. The idea found in Patanjali's verse 3, that then awareness abides in itself, as a term in Gurudeva's Shumchef language, Kaif. Definition of Kaif is pure awareness, aware only of itself. Superconsciousness, the core of consciousness. Feeling yourself going in and in and in into the seventh dimensional area of the mind called Kaif. Being aware of simply being aware. It only takes a moment to become aware of being aware, but to hold this state for any length of time, preparation has to be made. So that last point, the fourth point, Gurudeva elaborates on this next slide. Gurudeva gives this basic explanation of Kaif. Kaif is a fairly simple state to attain. It is not a deep transcendental area that takes years to attain, but it does take a long time to be able to sustain the state of Kaif for more than an instant or two. Ask anyone and they will tell you that they can at any moment become aware that they are aware. That is Kaif. To remain longer in this state than a fleeting second does take practice. And Gurudeva talks about breath again. The breath should be well regulated and the nerve system harmonized, and the meditator should have made peace within himself, with family and friends, and be steadfast in this practice before the bliss of Kaif can be felt, and the state of Kaif held for longer periods of time. Okay, so now we're ready for Rajamanik's question.
Just a moment. We're trying to work on activating here. Okay, Rajan, your video should be active. There you are.
Yes. My question is, when we are in the state of Kaif, maybe for just a few seconds, is it that moment that we have the experience that we are in meditation?
Yes, you could say it that way. There you are. Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya Bodhinatha.
Yes, Kaif. Kaif, the simplest way to think of Kaif is Gurudeva has the analogy of a ball. So we can say the ball is like a camera that sees all 360 directions.
Yes.
So that's our awareness normally. It's looking out in all directions and receiving all these impressions. And then when that camera turns in on itself and doesn't have any perceptions other than itself, that's Kaif. So awareness aware only of itself is turned in. So it's the intelligence that is normally aware of things just being aware of itself. And definitely you can call that a state of meditation. And that's the goal, and that's how we become more detached from the various states of consciousness and less inclined to think those states of consciousness are us. They're not. They're the mind, and we can move from one state of consciousness to another. But that which perceives the state of consciousness, just like the camera, the 360-degree angle, is the awareness. When turned in on itself, perceiving only itself is Kaif. Okay?
Thank you, Bodhinatha.
You're very welcome.
I think we may have a question from Dharmalingam. I'm trying to find out.
Okay.
Dharmalingam, can you hear us? Hello, Dharmalingam? Hello, Dharmalingam? Okay, I don't see it working for the moment.
Okay. last questions? This is our last slide here. Left some space for questions, thinking there'd be a few of them. One last chance. Okay, well, to just comment on what we presented. Look at the first, oh, here we go, question. Shadeva and Kamala have a question.
Yes, we'll take a moment to activate here.
We looked at the first 11 verses of the last chapter, chapter 4. Explained carefully restraint, how to be summa with a controlled mind. We don't want to sit there the whole meditation trying to control the mind with effort. To reach a point where the mind's controlled. That's the goal. And that can take a while to learn. And then we looked at yoga as separation. So that the seer and the seen, the Purusha and Prakriti, awareness and consciousness, we learn to separate them. Those are just terms for the same thing, not different things. 3 different terminologies. We learn to separate them, and that ties into Gurudeva's approach to meditation in the Shum language, which is based on separation. Learning to take awareness out of consciousness, turn it in on itself. And when we do that, when awareness is only aware of itself, we have kaif. Very important achievement to learn how to do in Shum meditation. And those are some of the main points we did. Did we have them yet?
Yes, they are on.
Om Shivaya.
Shivaya.
Is the sound coming through?
Sound is really good. There you are. We even got a great photo.
Thank you, Bodhinatha. The question had to do with the previous ones about the yogis being able to dissolve their karma immediately and wanting to try and work to that direction. How is it they're able to do that? And the question is like, is it because by being wiser, their karma, Shaya, the karmic deposits, their actions are wiser? Or is it as well through the Vas, they're more control of their feelings, they don't react as much, so they don't create the vasanas? How is it we can strive for that?
Oh, you don't want to strive for that. That's too advanced. That just comes. That's like a really great rishi ends up in that state. It's in the Merging with Shiva. If you search for the term riding on water, you'll find it. It's in one of the last chapters of Merging with Shiva, talking about great rishis and their attainments. That's my memory. But it's just something that comes to someone like Gurudeva, a great rishi, that they reach the point where they act and the reaction happens immediately and nothing carries into the future. But the best we can try for it in the normal state is to act wisely. And therefore something comes, but it's very nice. That's how we control karma. Sometimes it's said, I've had it happen, karma, what can I do? It just comes and happens, and why even bother? Nothing I can do to control it, right? That's when things are going wrong, we say that. But the point is, we can act wisely in the present. That's where we have total control over karma. How we choose to act in the present is creating our future. So that's how we learn to control karma in the first place. It is wise action in the present moment. It's, helps people, it doesn't harm them, it's unselfish, so forth, all those qualities in our actions. And we're creating a wonderful future for ourselves, which is the first approach to controlling karma.
Thank you, Lord.
You're very welcome. Thank you for such a good question. Okay, one last chance. Right on time here. We have 1 minute left. Wasn't sure at all how how long this would take. So it worked out perfectly. Okay, well, I think we'll call it good then. Next seminar is in approximately 2 months, and we'll announce the date. And thank you all for tuning in. Om Namah Shivaya.